everyone, today I'm doing a video, as you can see from the title, about the differences when you're a young teacher teaching in a high school. There are so many pros and cons when it comes to being a young person teaching in a high school, and I think these things are kind of important to consider before you go into it as a profession. This is all based on, my own opinion and my own experiences and that of my friends who are also young teachers. Some of these conclusions I make might be a result of my behaviour management or how I approach my relationships with my students, so just keep that in mind. These also might be a result of the demographic I teach, which is at an all-boys high school. They're quite academically gifted and they're from usually a middle to upper class background. For some context, I'm 23 years old. I started teaching when I was 22, and it's easy to say that students automatically treated me different to other teachers. The biggest difference I found before I get into the pros and cons of being a young teacher is that you do not look like the typical authority figure to them. They're used to being told what to do by people who look like their parent or older. However, when someone is younger than that, they're not used to treating you with the exact same respect. I do find that the respect they do show you is more what you would see with like an older sibling or an older friend, or cousin even. Not that this is anything I necessarily strive for, and it's both a struggle and sometimes a blessing. I'm going to start off with the cons and then end with the pros. And so the first con is that they may not take you seriously. I say this mostly in regards to behaviour management and punishment, and even just instruction in general. They don't want to be told what to do by someone who looks your age. Because you don't look like the boss, and maybe this is just my persona in the class, maybe I'm a bit more meek in class. However, they don't want to take instruction from someone who doesn't look like the boss, who doesn't look like a full-on adult. The second struggle or con is that they can and will find you on social media of all kinds. They'll find anything and everything about you they can, and so that's something to be really mindful of before you start at a new school. This is almost guaranteed. Like in the first week of you coming to their school, they will find you online. It just happens. It's just how it is. I'm fortunate I've been really mindful of what I posted online all throughout my years, and so there's nothing that my students could find that would make me feel ashamed or really truly embarrassed. However, they have found, my music MySpace that I can no longer delete, which I've tried to delete, and so there are photos of me still coming up on Google image search when I'm a lot younger, when I'm 13 years old. So I look so young and, playing guitar and stuff, which I'm not fully embarrassed about. It's just a little bit embarrassing. This con can also be taken further depending on your students, depending on your situation. If students hack you or make fake social media profiles of you. This is usually a ploy for them to find out stuff about other teachers, and so they'll make a profile of you using your picture that they've found online and then try and add other teachers. This happens across so many schools. My friends have experienced this all over the place, and so I think it's unfortunately a really common thing that happens with young teachers. That's definitely something to keep in mind, and always to remind your co-workers at your new school to talk to you in person before they accept a friend request or a follow request from you on social media, just in case it is a student trying to be sneaky. The third struggle is that you might need to justify your knowledge and expertise in an area before they see you as being the expert in the room. Even though you're just as qualified as every other teacher in that school, unless you look like you've been teaching that content for 20 plus years, they sometimes will fight you with something they disagree with. In my experience, it didn't matter to some students that I had a 4-year bachelor degree from the best music university in this country. They were still going to fight me on whether they thought I was wrong about something, even if it's just as simple as the correct terminology or how to notate something. It is my advice to ensure you're confident with everything you're going into the classroom with. So if you're unsure about the content or how to do something, really make sure you read up about it, you practice whatever you need to do so that you can go in with your best foot forward and be confident in that classroom. On the other hand, being able to admit to your students that you don't know everything, that you're willing to admit you're wrong, can be really beneficial. You want to be modeling behavior where you're asking for help, you can admit that you're wrong, and you're willing to learn from your mistakes. And I think that's a really fantastic thing to be demonstrating to your students, to not always act like you know everything and you're confident at everything. And the last struggle or the last con is that you don't have the experience of how schools just work. You may not know what to do in different situations or what channels and protocols you have to go through as a teacher. There's only so much that your practicals can expose you to, and you have to be willing to ask for help and advice constantly. There are so many unwritten rules and expectations about teachers, and you can only learn it from experience or from the experience of other teachers. There will be plenty of moments in your first however many years of teaching where you feel completely out of your comfort zone and you have no idea what you're doing. Whether it be report writing or parent communication or behavior management protocols or parent-teacher interviews, you cannot be 100% prepared for these until you've thrown yourself in the deep end and just had to figure it out. All that you can do is ask for help, accept that you don't know everything, and admit and learn from your mistakes. Now I'll move on to the pros and the positive things about being a young teacher. The first positive is that students see you more as an ally than an enemy. This, I think, is just simply because of your age. You look like you've experienced similar things to them. In the same way that it is a struggle that you don't look like an authority figure to them, they're more likely to think you will be on their side and understand their situation. They might trust you sooner and confide in you about problems they're having, because I think by your age they think you have a better understanding of the situation that they're in. Whether this is true or not, maybe you have no experience in the area they're asking for help with. I have had students come to me with a problem because they don't know how to phrase it, or they don't know how to bring it up with a more experienced teacher, and they don't think that I'm going to misunderstand what they're saying. The second pro is that they want to get to know you and know your opinion on things. This is one that can be a double-edged sword. I know this doesn't sound like a positive, and it isn't all the time. However, when students start asking you questions about yourself, you're starting a conversation, you're starting to communicate, and you're building a relationship with them. They just want to know stuff about you, whether it be your age, or what school you went to, or what you did on the weekend. They just want to know because you look more relatable than teachers that look like their parents. Often you don't have to give students very much information at all, whether it just be what you've been watching on Netflix, in order for them to feel like they're building a connection with you. I feel the more conversations you have with your kids, whether it's about school or not, is creating communication, is fostering that relationship you have with them, so they know that you care what they say, whether it's about classwork or not. That sort of relationship can come in so handy if there are any problems that arise, or if the student needs help, or they just need advice from a trusted adult about something. I always think, why would a student want to tell you that they're being bullied, or they don't understand what's happening in class, or they're struggling with mental health, if you've never even had a mildly personal conversation with them before? In that same regard, students will ask you questions in order to gauge their own opinion of you. Obviously they do this to teachers of all ages. However, I do feel I get asked a lot of non-school related questions by students, more so than other teachers. Students will often ask me questions about my opinion on different musicians or current events in order to gauge whether I understand and respect the things that they like. I really do think it's beneficial to be up to date on things concerning your subject area, so students see you're not switched off about the world you live in, and that you don't just stick with what you like and what you value the highest. For example, even if I express that I don't like something, just knowing what Fortnite is or who Lil Pump is shows students that I'm not out of touch and irrelevant. The final positive part about being a young teacher is that because you seem more relatable to your students, they are more likely to take to heart what you say. I think in the same way that you could give advice to your son or your daughter, and then their best friend could say the exact same thing, and it's going to be more powerful coming from them because they look like them. It is more likely that you have shared experiences with your students, and you are more likely to truly understand what they're going through. I'm of course not trying to say that teachers with more experience cannot do this. However, I think the closer you look to your students, the more likely they are to take it to heart. For example, because social media was a huge part of my teenage years and growing up, I really do understand the pressures they have and the obligations they have socially with that. Another example is if I see a Year 12 student, for instance, who is really struggling with the HSC, the pressures, the stress, I can talk to them about how when I was doing the HSC 6 years ago, I was crying like weekly for the majority of the HSC because I was so stressed, because I felt so much pressure from others and myself about doing well, that I just had to let it out, because I would just bottle up the stress and then just let it out. And I can talk to them about how Crying was actually super beneficial for my mental health and being able to let that stress out. Being able to have gone through an experience and come out the other end and be able to tell your students that it will work out in the end is really powerful. There is really so much power in speaking your truth, in showing your vulnerability to students so that they really can see you as just another human and might be more likely to open up to you about anything they're going through. So many teenagers struggle by themselves and don't ask for help when they need it. So trying to ensure that they know that you understand them and you're there to support them is so important. I really don't think that these sort of relationships can be built with students without giving a piece of yourself away to them. In order to create a relationship with a student where they know that you understand them, you are there to support them, and that it's okay to struggle and get help. I definitely know for a fact that I'm not a scary authority figure in my classroom, which can make some things quite difficult. However, I think I can balance that out with the relationships that I've built with my students. For anyone who's still watching, I would love to know what you think about this. Maybe all of my conclusions are just a result of my own personality in the class. Maybe none of it is impacted by my age. I'd love to hear from any other teachers about whether you agree or you disagree with what I've said, or any experiences you've had where you think your age has been a significant factor in how something has occurred in the classroom. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.